Welcome to Seerat Un-Nabi. Discover the timeless legacy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Have you ever wondered what Arabia was like before Islam? What made the Prophet Muhammad the most influential man in history? Let's explore the life that changed the world forever. This is not just history. It's the light that still guides hearts today. The life of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The genealogy of Muhammad. In the earlier episodes, the history of the Quraysh of Mecca was discussed, including a brief mention of the ancestors of the Prophet. Now, their detailed genealogy is being presented again. According to various historical sources and references, the lineage of the Prophet connects to Hazrat Ismail, alayhi salam, after 40 generations. However, due to the lack of reliable information about all his ancestors' names, the genealogy of the Prophet is traced up to Hazrat Adnan. Hazrat Adnan was born approximately 20 generations after Hazrat Ismail, alayhi salam, and his descendants are referred to as Banu Adnan after him. The genealogy of the Prophet up to Hazrat Adnan is as follows. Hazrat Muhammad, son of Abdullah, son of Abd al-Muttalib, son of Hashim, son of Abd Manaf, son of Qusay, son of Kilab, son of Murrah, son of Kabi, son of Luai, son of Kalib, son of Fir, son of Malik, son of Nader, son of Kinana, son of Khazaimah, son of Madarika, son of Ilyas, son of Madar, son of Nazar, son of Ma'ad, son of Adnan. Ibn Hisham 1 2. Tariq al-Tabari 239, 271. There is a difference of opinion among historians and genealogists regarding the accuracy of the genealogy above Adnan. Some historians are skeptical, while others accept it. The genealogy is said to ultimately trace back to Hazrat Ibrahim, alayhi salam. The extended lineage of Adnan is as follows. Adnan, son of Ud, son of Hamisa, son of Solomon, son of Aws, son of Yuz, son of Kumul, son of Abi, son of Awam, son of Nazhid, son of Haza, son of Balida, son of Yadlaf, son of Tabik, son of Jahim, son of Naash, son of Maki, son of Id, son of Abkar, son of Ubaid, son of Alduay, son of Hamdan, son of Sambar, son of Yathrabi, son of Yazan, son of Yalan, son of Arwi, son of Id, son of Dishan, son of Asar, son of Afan, son of Ayam, son of Maxer, son of Nath, son of Zerah, son of Sami, son of Matzi, son of Iwada, son of Aram, son of Kedar, son of Ismail, alayhi salam, son of Ibrahim, alayhi salam. Tabakat ibn Sa'd 156, 57, Tariq al-Tabari 2 for 272. There are certainly some inaccuracies in the lineage above Hazrat Ibrahim, and it ultimately traces back to Hazrat Adam, alayhi salam. The lineage of Hazrat Ibrahim is as follows. Ibrahim, son of Terah, Azar, son of Nahur, son of Sarug, Yasaruf, son of Aryu, son of Phalik, son of Abir, son of Shalik, son of Arfakshad, son of Sam, son of Na, As, son of Lamech, son of Matushalak, son of Aknak. It is said that his name was Idris, son of Yard, son of Mahalil, son of Chinan, son of Anusha, son of Shith, son of Adam, alayhi salam. Ibn Hisham 1, 2, 4. Tariq al-Tabari 2, 276. There is also some variation in the names in these sources, and some names are absent in certain references. The family of the noble prophet Muhammad. The family of the noble prophet is renowned by the name Hashemi, after his great-grandfather Hashim bin Abd Manaf. It seems appropriate to briefly present the details of some of the notable individuals from the family of the noble prophet. 1. Qusay bin Kilab. Qusay bin Kilab was an ancestor of the Prophet, 5 generations before him. He was the one who not only reclaimed the custodianship of the Kaaba from the Banu Qaza, but also organized and united his tribe, Banu Ismail, and the Quraysh tribe. Through this, he transformed Mecca into a structured and organized city-state. The custodianship of the Kaaba was such a privilege that it granted Qusay bin Kilab and his descendants a special leadership status and immense respect, not just in Mecca but across the Arabian Peninsula. Qusay bin Kilab proved himself worthy of this honor. Qusay bin Kilab held an absolute monarchy-like authority over the city-state of Mecca. He not only rebuilt the Kaaba after it had fallen into disrepair but also, for the first time, added a roof made of date palm leaves. In addition, he took steps to reform the administration of the Kaaba. Additionally, he constructed a building near the Kaaba called Dar al-Nadwa, where discussions and decisions were made on various matters involving the leaders and elders of Banu Ismail and other tribes of Mecca. The Quraysh held gatherings, or prepared for wars in this building, and trade caravans would depart from here. Marriages and other ceremonies were also conducted in this building. Furthermore, to manage various state affairs, Qusay bin Kilab established 6 different divisions, distributing their management among his sons. After his death, his grandchildren expanded these 6 divisions into 10 and divided them among themselves through mutual understanding. 2. Hazrat Hashim bin Abd Manaf. Hazrat Hashim bin Abd Manaf was the grandson of Qusay bin Kilab. When an agreement was reached between Abd Manaf and the Banu Abd Aldar regarding the division of duties, Hazrat Hashim was entrusted with the role of providing water and hospitality to the pilgrims, known as Sakaya and Rafada. Hazrat Hashim was a very wealthy and highly esteemed figure. His original name was Amr, but since he was responsible for arranging the food and drink for the pilgrims, he used to serve them a special type of Arab dish called Hashim. In Arabic, Hashim refers to breaking bread into a broth. During a famine in Mecca, Hazrat Hashim arranged this broth for all the people of Mecca, which earned him the title Hashim, a name by which history remembers him. His descendants became known as the most prestigious tribe of the Quraysh, Banu Hashim. Hazrat Hashim initiated the Quraysh trade caravans and made agreements with the Byzantine Empire, allowing the Quraysh to trade in Byzantine-controlled regions without paying customs duties. He was also successful in making similar agreements with the king of Abyssinia, which greatly benefited the Quraysh. As a result, their trade caravans began traveling to regions such as Syria, Abyssinia, Turkey, and Yemen. On one of his trade journeys, Hazrat Hashim traveled to Syria. During the journey, he stopped in Yathrib, which later became Medina, or Madinat al-Rasul. There, he married a woman from the Banu Najjar tribe named Salma bint Amr. He stayed for a few days, then left for Syria, leaving his wife in her family's home while she was pregnant. He likely intended to bring her back to Mecca after the journey. However, shortly after their marriage, Hazrat Hashim passed away during his travels in the area of Gaza, Palestine. 3. Hazrat Abdul Muttalib. In the previous episode, we discussed Hazrat Hashim's journey to Syria, his marriage in Yathrib, and his passing away in Palestine. After his death, in 497 CE, his wife Salma gave birth to a son. Since the child's hair had white streaks, she named him Shayba, and he was raised in Yathrib at her parents' house. Later, this child became famous as Abdul Muttalib. For a long time, no one from the Hashemite family knew of his existence. After Hazrat Hashim's death, the responsibility of the Sakaya, water provision for pilgrims, and Rafada, hospitality for pilgrims, was passed to his brother Muttalib. Muttalib was a respected and noble figure among his people, known for his generosity. The Quraysh had given him the title Fayyad due to his generosity. When Shayba, later known as Abdul Muttalib, reached the age of 7 or 8, Muttalib became aware of him and went to fetch him. When he saw Shayba near Yathrib, he was moved to tears. He embraced him and took him on his camel, intending to return to Mecca. However, Shayba refused to go without his mother's permission. Muttalib then sought permission from his mother, and after receiving it, he brought Shayba, Abdul Muttalib, to Mecca. The people of Mecca, upon seeing him, assumed he was a slave of Muttalib, but Muttalib clarified that he was his nephew, the son of his brother Hashim. After Muttalib's death during a trip to Yemen, Abdul Muttalib inherited the positions of leadership and responsibility for the Kaaba. However, Nufail bin Abd Manaf, a rival, attempted to seize these positions. Abdul Muttalib sought the help of the Quraysh, but they were unresponsive. He then sought help from his maternal uncle, Abu Sa'd, who came with 80 horsemen. They confronted Nufail bin Abd Manaf, and Abu Sa'd warned him that if he did not return Abdul Muttalib's rights, he would be killed. Nufail relented, and the matter was resolved with the Quraysh's leaders as witnesses. However, after Abu Sa'd returned to Medina, Nufail bin Abd Manaf forged an alliance with Abd Shams bin Abd Manaf, the ancestor of Banu Umayyah, and began stirring up opposition against Abdul Muttalib. The Banu Qaza tribe supported Banu Hashim, and at Dar al-Nadwa, they pledged their allegiance to Abdul Muttalib. As a result, the leadership of the Quraysh remained with Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib earned such high esteem among his people that no one among his ancestors had attained such status. His people loved him deeply, and he was highly respected. 4. Hazrat Abdullah, father of the Prophet. Hazrat Abdul Muttalib had 10 sons and 6 daughters. Their names were sons, Harith, Zubair, Abu Talib, Abdullah, Hamza, R.A., Abu Lahab, Gadak, Makam, Safar, and Abbas, R.A. Daughters, al-Hakim, also known as Beta, Bara, Attika, Arwa, Umayma, and Safiya, R.A. Hazrat Abdullah's mother was Fatima, the daughter of Amr bin Aid bin Imran bin Maqsam bin Yaqsa bin Murrah. Among Abdul Muttalib's children, Abdullah was the most handsome, virtuous, and beloved. He was also called Zabi, the sacrificial one, because Abdul Muttalib had vowed that if Allah blessed him with 10 sons who reached adulthood, he would sacrifice one of them in the way of Allah. Allah accepted his prayer, and when all 10 sons reached adulthood, Abdul Muttalib remembered his vow. He gathered his sons and went to the Kaaba to perform the sacrifice. When the lot was drawn, it fell to Abdullah. Abdul Muttalib then headed towards the sacrificial place with Abdullah. Seeing this, the people of Banu Hashim, who were very fond of Abdullah, became distressed and advised him to seek the counsel of a woman in Yathrib who was known for her wisdom. When consulted, the woman suggested that instead of sacrificing Abdullah, a blood ransom, diya, be paid. In the Arabian tradition, the ransom was 10 camels, so a draw was held for 10 camels. The drawing continued until, on the 10th draw, the camels were chosen instead of Abdullah. Thus, 100 camels were sacrificed in place of Abdullah. Hazrat Abdullah married Hazrat Amina, daughter of Wahb bin Abd Manaf bin Zurah bin Kilab, who was considered the noblest woman of the Quraysh in terms of lineage and status. Her father was the leader of the Banu Zurah tribe. She moved to Makkah after the marriage, but shortly thereafter, Hazrat Abdullah was sent by Abdul Muttalib to bring dates from Medina. He fell ill during the journey and passed away there. Some historians say that Hazrat Abdullah went to Syria for trade and, on his return journey with a Quraysh caravan, fell ill and died in Medina. His burial took place at the house of Nabiga Jadi. He was 25 years old at the time of his death. Most historians agree that the Prophet was not yet born, but some sources say that the Prophet was born 2 months before his father's death. The birth of the Prophet and 2 important events. In the previous episode, we discussed the childhood of the Prophet's grandfather, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, and how he became the leader of the Quraysh of Makkah. In this episode, we will highlight 2 major historical events that took place during his life. The first event is the Year of the Elephant, Aam al-Fil, when the ruler of Yemen, Abraha bin Ashram, marched with a large army to destroy the Kaaba in Makkah. However, Allah sent small birds to defeat Abraha's army and protect the Kaaba. This event has already been detailed in previous episodes. The second important event was the rediscovery of the Zamzam well. A long time before this, when the tribe of Banu Juram controlled Makkah, a dispute over ownership led to the filling of the Zamzam well with soil. Over time, the well's location disappeared and was forgotten. Hazrat Ali, recounting what he had heard from his father Hazrat Abu Talib, narrates that one day Hazrat Abdul Muttalib was sleeping in his chamber when he had a dream. In the dream, he was instructed to dig the Zamzam well, and the exact location was pointed out to him, which was inside the haram, right where the statues of Asaf and Naila had been placed. When Hazrat Abdul Muttalib shared his dream with the Quraysh and other tribes of Makkah, no one believed him, and no one offered to assist him in the task. At that time, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib had only one son, Harith, who joined him in digging the spot indicated in the dream. After 4 days of digging, water appeared, and the Zamzam well was found, from which water began to flow continuously, as it does to this day. Since this well had been originally provided by Allah through the footsteps of Hazrat Ismail, alayhi salam, the other tribes of Makkah sought to claim ownership of it. However, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib believed that the well had been granted to him by Allah. To settle the dispute, it was decided according to Arab customs that an experienced and wise person should make the final decision. Various tribal representatives, including Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, set out to consult a famous soothsayer, a woman skilled in spiritual matters, in Syria, as the Arabs highly regarded the words of soothsayers. On their way out of Makkah, the entire group, except for Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, ran out of water and were on the brink of death due to thirst. The other tribes refused to share their water, and the situation became so dire that the group began digging graves for those who were about to die. The next day, Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib decided not to fear death and resolved to continue the journey. As he mounted his camel, it stepped firmly on the ground, and a spring of water gushed forth from the earth. All the tribes benefited from this newfound water. Witnessing this miraculous occurrence, everyone was compelled to believe that some divine force was supporting Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib. The tribal representatives then unanimously decided that the dispute over Zamzam had been resolved by Allah's will. It was clear that the water, flowing at that very spot, had been a sign that the right to Zamzam was with Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib. Therefore, they all agreed to return to Mecca. It was during this time that Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib made a vow. If Allah blessed him with 10 sons who survived to adulthood, he would sacrifice one of them at the Kaaba. The marriage of Hazrat Abdullah and Hazrat Amina. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abdul-Muttalib was born in 545 CE. His mother was Fatima bint Amr, and he followed the religion of Hanif, the Abrahamic faith. There is no record of him participating in idol worship or engaging in any immoral practices which were common in pre-Islamic Arabia. As previously mentioned, Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib had made a vow that if he were blessed with 10 sons, and they all reached adulthood, he would sacrifice one of them in the way of Allah. After Hazrat Abdullah was spared from the sacrifice, Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib decided to arrange his marriage. Hazrat Abdullah, like his father and grandfather, was known for his striking beauty and noble character. Many noble women of Mecca were eager to marry him. However, the honor of becoming the mother of the Prophet was destined for Hazrat Amina bint Wahb. The desire to marry Hazrat Abdullah was not merely based on his outward appearance, but also because of the light of prophethood that radiated from his forehead, like the moon. Among the women who desired to marry him was Cattle, the daughter of the famous scholar Waraka bin Nawfal's sister. Waraka bin Nawfal was an expert in the previous divine scriptures, and he had informed his sister that the light on Hazrat Abdullah's forehead was the light of prophethood, which is why Cattle wished that this light would be passed through her womb. Another woman, a seer named Fatima bint Mur al-Khathamiyah, had sensed through her spiritual insight that the light on Hazrat Abdullah's forehead was indeed the light of prophethood, and thus, she too desired to marry him. However, Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib chose Hazrat Amina, the daughter of Wahb ibn Abd Manaf, from the noble tribe of Seerah. Hazrat Amina was known for her purity and virtuous nature, making her stand out among all the women of the Quraysh. Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib went to Wahb and requested his daughter Amina's hand in marriage for his son, Hazrat Abdullah. Wahb agreed, and the marriage was arranged. At this occasion, Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib also married a woman named Hala, the daughter of Wahb ibn Abd Manaf, who gave birth to Hazrat Hamza and Hazrat Safiya, two prominent figures in Islam. Hazrat Hamza, R.A., was not only the uncle of the Prophet, but also his cousin through his mother, as Hala and Amina were paternal sisters. Meanwhile, when Cattle and Fatima bint Mur al-Khathamiyah learned of this marriage, they were deeply disappointed and wept, mourning their failure to secure the privilege of becoming the mother of the Prophet. Their sorrow was indeed justified, for the honor of being the mother of the final Prophet is greater than all the wealth of the world, and this honor was written in the fate of Hazrat Amina. The rise of the dawn. At the time of Hazrat Abdullah's marriage, his age was approximately 17 or 22 years. In Arab tradition, it was customary for the groom to live at his in-laws' house for 3 months after the wedding. Accordingly, Hazrat Abdullah stayed at Hazrat Amina's house for 3 months before returning to Mecca with her. Before Islam, in the pre-Islamic era of ignorance, Jahiliyyah, formal marriages were not common. Only the aristocracy occasionally held formal marriages, while the rest of the population often engaged in unlawful relationships. After the advent of Islam, those couples who had formally married were recognized as legitimate, and after they embraced Islam, their pre-Islamic marriages were considered valid by Islamic law without requiring a new marriage contract. Hazrat Abdullah and Hazrat Amina's marriage was one such valid and formal union, which is why Prophet Muhammad later said, "My birth was the result of a legitimate marriage, not through adultery or fornication." As mentioned in earlier episodes, the commercial caravans of the Quraysh would travel to regions like Iran, Syria, Yemen, In India, Hazrat Abdullah, too, had gone to Syria as part of a caravan. On his way back to Mecca, he fell seriously ill near Yathrib, Medina, and had to stay with his maternal uncles there, while his companions continued their journey back to Mecca. When Hazrat Abdul Muttalib did not see his beloved son returning, he inquired about Hazrat Abdullah. Upon hearing of his illness, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib was deeply worried and immediately sent his eldest son, Hazrat Harith, to Yathrib to check on Hazrat Abdullah's condition. Unfortunately, Hazrat Harith arrived to find that Hazrat Abdullah had passed away from his illness and was buried in Dar al-Gabga, a place in Yathrib. When Hazrat Harith returned to Mecca with the tragic news, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib was overwhelmed with grief and fainted. Hazrat Amina, upon hearing the news of her beloved husband's death, was struck with shock. The entire family of Banu Hashim was enveloped in mourning, for Hazrat Abdullah, known for his beauty, character, and exceptional personality, was the pride of the family. But at just 25 years of age, this shining star had faded, and the Prophet was still in his mother's womb when he became an orphan. The grief of Hazrat Abdul Muttalib for his beloved son was matched only by the intense sorrow of Hazrat Amina for the loss of her husband. Yet, Allah did not allow them to mourn for long. Just a few months after Hazrat Abdullah's death, on Monday, 9th Rabi al-Awwal, April 20th, 571 CE, Hazrat Amina gave birth to Allah's beloved, Hazrat Muhammad. A servant girl was sent to deliver the joyous news to Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, who was likely in the sacred mosque, Haram Sharif, at the time. Upon hearing the great news, Hazrat Abdul Muttalib hurried to his house and, upon seeing the newborn prophet, was so moved that he stood speechless. He then expressed his feelings in a few verses, praising the beauty of the newborn, declaring that the beauty of the prophet surpassed even that of the gilman, young male servants, and thanked Allah for granting him a replacement for Hazrat Abdullah. The rays of guidance spread everywhere. There are a few miraculous events, although the historical authenticity of some may be weak, that occurred shortly before and during the birth of the prophet. One such event is described by Hazrat Amina, who recounts that just before giving birth, while in a semi-dazed state, she felt a light emanate from her body that illuminated the entire east and west. After this light appeared, she felt relief from the labor pains, and then the light gathered close to her. She felt as though this luminous being had taken a handful of soil from the earth and brought it to her, which she took in her hands. Then the light turned its gaze toward the sky. Hazrat Uthman ibn Abi al-Az's mother narrates that she was present during Hazrat Amina's delivery, and she saw nothing but light. Furthermore, stars appeared to come so close to the earth that they seemed as though they would fall. Similarly, Hazrat Abdul Rahman ibn Auf's mother, who was serving as a wet nurse at the time, recalls that when the Prophet was born and placed in her hands, such a light radiated from his body that it illuminated the entire room, including its walls. One remarkable account involves a Jewish man, Hisham bin Urwa, from his father and Umm-ul-Mu'minin Hazrat Aisha, narrates that a Jewish merchant living in Mecca asked the Quraysh if they knew about the great child born among them the previous night. The Quraysh replied that they did not know. Upon further inquiry, it was revealed that the child was born to Hazrat Amina, the daughter of Wahb, the wife of Hazrat Abdullah. The Jewish man asked the Quraysh to take him to see the child. When the Jewish man was brought to the newborn prophet, the people saw that his face was more radiant than the moon, shining with the light of prophethood. The Jewish man then looked at the prophet's back, where he saw the seal of prophethood, a cluster of hair resembling a horse's mane, located between his shoulders. Overcome with awe, the Jewish man fainted. When he regained consciousness, the Quraysh asked him, "What happened to you?" He wept and exclaimed, "Today, the line of prophethood has passed from Bani Israel to your people." He then blessed the Quraysh, saying, "This news will spread from the east to the west." The predictions of Jewish religious scholars at the time of Prophet's birth. Hafiz Abu Na'im, in his book Dalail al-Nubuwah, narrates an account from Abdurrahman bin Abi Sa'id. He mentions that one day Abdurrahman bin Abi Sa'id was staying in the tribe of Banu Ashhal. At that time, he had no knowledge of the birth of Prophet Muhammad. However, the following day, when he and his companions reached a place called Hudna in the tribe of Harb, they overheard a Jewish scholar named Yusha saying, I can see that a prophet named Ahmad has been born in Mecca." Upon hearing this, a man from Banu Ashal, Khalifa bin Thalaba al-Ashali, asked Yusha, "Are you joking? Tell us, what are the qualities of this prophet?" Yusha replied, "This prophet will emerge from the sacred land, Haram. His stature will be neither short nor too tall. His eyes will have reddish streaks, and he will wear a turban along with his attire." When Khalifa bin Thalaba returned to his tribe and narrated Yusha's words, his tribesmen replied, "You speak of only Yusha, but since yesterday, all the Jews in Yathrib, Medina, are saying the same things." The prophecy of Jewish scholar Zubair bin Bada. Malik bin Sinan narrates that one day, by chance, he visited the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza. There, he observed a large gathering where their renowned scholar, Zubair bin Bada, was saying, "A red star has appeared in the sky, which only emerges when a prophet is born. The prophet born today is named Ahmad, and he is the last prophet. He will migrate to this very land." This prophecy of Zubair bin Bada remained well known. Years later, when someone narrated this incident to Prophet Muhammad, he said, "If Zubair bin Bada had embraced Islam, his entire tribe would have followed him, as they were his staunch followers." The Jews' jealousy and denial. Abu Na'im, quoting other reliable narrators and Zayd bin Thabit R.A., mentions that the Jewish tribes of Banu Qurayza and Banu Nadir used to say, "The red star only appears at the birth of the last prophet. His name will be Ahmad, and he will migrate to Yathrib, Medina. It is incumbent upon us to follow him." However, when Prophet Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina, the same Jews, who had settled in Medina, awaiting the fulfillment of prophecies in their sacred books about the coming of the final prophet in Arabia, refused to believe in him. Their jealousy stemmed from the fact that the last prophet had been sent among the descendants of Ismail, alayhi salam, rather than the descendants of Israel. Out of envy, they not only rejected the truth, but also continued to conceal it and persist in disbelief knowingly. Strange events at the time of Prophet's birth. Several extraordinary events occurred at the time of the Prophet's birth. For instance, 1. A powerful earthquake struck the palace of the Persian Emperor, Kisra, causing 14 of its towers to collapse. 2. The sacred fire of the royal Zoroastrian fire temple, which had been burning for 1,000 years, was suddenly extinguished. 3. Lake Sawa, a famous lake in Persia, suddenly dried up. The collapse of the idols of falsehood. In the previous episode, we discussed the passing of Hazrat Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib and some extraordinary events at the time of the birth of Prophet Muhammad. In this episode, we will delve into another remarkable incident that occurred in the palace of the Persian emperor. Hafiz Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Jafar bin Sahl al-Qara'iti narrates in his book Hawadith al-Jinn through various sources that during the blessed birth of Prophet Muhammad, a severe earthquake struck the palace of the famous Persian emperor Nashirwan. As a result, 14 of the palace's domes collapsed. If the incident had been limited to this alone, it could have been dismissed as a mere accident. However, alongside this earthquake, several other extraordinary and astonishing occurrences took place. One such event was the sudden extinguishing of the sacred fire in the royal fire temple, which had been burning continuously for 1,000 years. Never before had this sacred flame gone out. Additionally, Lake Sawa, an important lake in Persia, mysteriously began to boil and then dried up completely. Nashirwan, deeply shaken by these events, summoned his advisor, Mubayzin, and narrated the incidents, seeking his opinion. Mubayzin informed Nashirwan that the previous night he had also experienced a strange dream. In the dream, he saw groups of people riding camels surging from the direction of Arabia toward Persia, crossing the river Tigris. Nashirwan, already troubled by the incidents, became even more concerned after hearing the dream. He asked Mubayzin to interpret it. Mubayzin suggested consulting a learned scholar to understand the true significance of these events and dreams. Following this advice, Nashirwan wrote a letter to his deputy in Yemen, Nu'man bin Mundhir, instructing him to immediately come to his court, accompanied by a knowledgeable person capable of interpreting these events. Upon receiving the royal decree, Nu'man bin Mundhir promptly arrived at Nashirwan's court. Alongside him, he brought a renowned Christian scholar named Abdul Masih bin Amr bin Hayyan bin Nafila al-Ghassani. Noshirwan narrated the events in Mubayzin's dream to Abdul-Masih and asked for its interpretation. Abdul-Masih replied that while he could share his understanding, it would be best to consult his uncle Sa'di, who was based in Syria and served as a deputy under the Roman emperor. Sa'di, he explained, was far more knowledgeable and adept at interpreting such matters. Noshirwan approved this suggestion and sent Abdul-Masih with some of his men to meet Sa'di in Syria. Sa'diya's prophecy. Abdul-Masih traveled to Damascus, the capital of Syria, and presented himself before his uncle Sa'di, who was seated regally on his golden throne. He narrated the events in Mubayzin's dream, mentioning that he had come on behalf of Emperor Noshirwan, who sought an interpretation. After hearing the account, Sa'di fell silent, lost in deep thought. Abdul-Masih, seeing no response, assumed Sa'di was indifferent to his request. Expressing his discontent, Abdul-Masih recited verses lamenting Sa'diya's lack of attention. Hearing the poetry, Sa'di emerged from his contemplation and said, "If the events in dream are as you have described, then understand this. One day, not only will the Persian Empire fall from Noshirwan's lineage, but even this land of Syria, where I rule as a deputy under the Roman emperor, will be taken over by the Arab camel riders seen crossing the Tigris in Mubayzin's dream." When Abdul-Masih returned to Persia and conveyed Sa'diya's prophecy to Noshirwan, the emperor remarked, "My dynasty will continue to rule for several generations. Whatever happens after that will be dealt with later." The fulfillment of prophecy. History bears witness that Sa'diya's prediction came true word for word. From the final days of the Prophet Muhammad's blessed life, Islamic campaigns against Persia and Rome began. Ultimately, during the caliphate of the third rightly guided caliph, Hazrat Uthman ibn Affan, R.A., these efforts reached completion. The 3,164-year-long Persian monarchy was brought to its knees under the hooves of the Islamic army's horses, and the Islamic flag was raised over the land of Syria. Events following the birth of the Prophet. According to narrations, when the Prophet Muhammad was born, the joyous news was immediately sent to his grandfather, Abdul-Muttalib, by Amina. Amina, whose original name was Baraka, was the maid of Abdullah, the Prophet's father. Later, the Prophet arranged her marriage to his freed slave, Zaid bin Haritha, and they had a son, Usama bin Zaid. Overjoyed, Amina ran to Abdul-Muttalib, who was in the Kaaba at the time, and informed him of the birth. Hearing the news, Abdul-Muttalib was elated and rushed home with her. Upon seeing the beauty of the young prophet, he was astonished and expressed his feelings in verses, describing the beauty of the newborn as surpassing even the charm of the Gilman, handsome boys of paradise. He thanked Allah for blessing him with this grandson as a substitute for his son Abdullah. Note the Prophet's father Abdullah, grandfather Abdul-Muttalib, and great-grandfather Hashim were all known for their striking beauty and dignity, much like the Prophet himself. Various sources, including those from Imam Bayhaqi and companions like Abbas bin Abdul-Muttalib and his son Abdullah bin Abbas, report that the Prophet was born circumcised. Abdul-Muttalib was amazed by this and expressed great delight. Imam Bayhaqi also narrates from multiple sources that after the Prophet's birth, Abdul-Muttalib entrusted him to the care of the women in his household. Each morning, these women would inform Abdul-Muttalib of the child's exceptional nature. They noticed that the baby would always be awake at dawn, gazing at the sky with wide-open eyes. Abdul-Muttalib would joyfully remark that his grandson was destined for greatness. For the first few days, the Prophet's mother, Amina, nursed him. After 2 or 3 days, he was nursed by Thuwayba, the freed slave of Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab freed her in celebration of the Prophet's birth. Thuwayba had also nursed the Prophet's uncle, Hamza, and other children. Unfortunately, Abu Lahab, who initially celebrated the Prophet's birth, later became one of his fiercest opponents. Alongside his wife, Jamil, he spent his life opposing Islam. Abu Lahab likely played a significant role in misleading the Quraysh of Mecca and cursing the Prophet during his public call to monotheism on Mount Safa. Jamil even scattered thorns on paths where the Prophet would walk. These actions led to the revelation of an entire surah, Surah Al-Masad, condemning Abu Lahab and his wife, which will be detailed in future episodes. The naming and Akikah ceremony. On the 7th day after the Prophet's birth, His grandfather Abdul-Muttalib performed the Akikah ceremony and invited the Quraysh to join in the celebration. During the gathering, someone asked, "O Abdul-Muttalib, have you named your grandson?" Abdul-Muttalib replied, "Yes, I have named him Muhammad." Hearing this name, the Quraysh were astonished as it was unprecedented in Arab history. Their surprise was understandable given that no one had ever been named Muhammad before. The custom of sending infants to the desert. At that time, it was customary for the elite and noble families of Mecca to send their infants to the surrounding villages and deserts. This practice ensured that the children would grow up in a pure environment, learn the eloquent Arabic language, and imbibe the unique characteristics of the Bedouins. This tradition was so cherished that even the Umayyad rulers, despite their royal grandeur, adhered to it. However, when Caliph al-Walid bin Abdul Malik was unable to follow this tradition due to specific circumstances, it led to his lack of fluency in classical Arabic, making him the only Umayyad caliph without this linguistic finesse. Twice a year, women from the nearby villages would come to Mecca seeking infants to nurse. In exchange, they would receive monetary compensation, enough to sustain them comfortably. Among the women who came seeking infants was Halima Sa'diyah from the tribe of Banu Hawazin. While the other women managed to find children to nurse, Halima was initially unsuccessful. Why Halima was unable to find a child and how she eventually came to nurse the Prophet are fascinating accounts narrated in historical sources. Due to the length of this episode, these events and the miraculous occurrences at Halima's home will be detailed in the next. In the care of Halima, Halima Sa'diyah arrived in Mecca with some women of her tribe in search of infants to nurse. In this episode, we will recount the fascinating events narrated by Halima herself about how she came to care for the Prophet Muhammad. Ibn Ishaq, through Jaham bin Abi Jaham, relays the account of Abdullah bin Ja'far bin Abi Talib, who heard it directly from Halima Sa'diyah. She narrates, "When news of multiple births in the noble families of Mecca reached the tribe of Banu Sa'id, a sub-tribe of Banu Hawazin, to which I belonged, the women of Banu Sa'id would rush to Mecca to nurse these infants for a fee. One such year, when several children were born in Mecca's distinguished families, 10 women, including myself, set out with our husbands and nursing infants. These were days of drought and famine, and we had nothing left. I was riding a frail white donkey, and we also had an emaciated camel that barely gave any milk. My child cried incessantly from hunger, and we couldn't sleep at night. I had no milk to feed him, and the camel couldn't provide anything either. We clung to hope for rain and prosperity. My donkey was so weak that it lagged behind, frustrating the entire caravan. Eventually, we reached Mecca, searching for infants to nurse. Every one of us was offered the Prophet Muhammad, but when we learned that he was an orphan, we all refused. We relied on the child's father for financial compensation, and we thought, what could an orphan's widow mother and his grandfather possibly give us for this reason? None of us wanted to take him. By the time we were ready to leave, all the other women had found children to nurse, but I had not. I disliked returning empty-handed while my companions took babies home. I told my husband, I will take that orphan child. I cannot bear to go back without a child. My husband said, there is no harm in it. Perhaps Allah will bless us through him. That night was the most challenging. We had no food for ourselves or fodder for our animals, and my baby cried all night, unable to nurse. Exhausted and hungry, I stayed awake until morning. The next day, I went to take the orphan child. I also hoped that his mother might give us enough to sustain ourselves and our animals. When I met the child's mother, Amina, she greeted me warmly and handed over her baby. The fee she gave me was more than I expected. Moreover, the child, whom I had initially hesitated to take, was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen. When he was placed in my lap and nestled against me, I felt a peace and comfort that is hard to describe. When I returned to my camp and nursed him, my breasts filled with milk, and he drank until he was full. My own son also nursed to his heart's content, and both of them slept peacefully, something that had not happened before. My husband went to milk the camel and found its udders full of milk. He milked enough for both of us to drink to our satisfaction, and we spent that night in comfort. The next morning, my husband said, Halima, by Allah, you have taken a blessed soul. I replied, I believe so too. We then departed with our caravan. I rode the same weak donkey, but now, by Allah, it outran the entire caravan. None of the other donkeys could keep up with it. My companions exclaimed, "O daughter of Abu Dhabi, what is this? Is this the same donkey you rode to Mecca?" I replied, "Yes, by Allah, it is the same." They said, "There is surely something extraordinary about it." Events during Prophet's upbringing by Hazrat Halima. In the previous episode, we discussed the events surrounding Hazrat Halima Sa'diyah coming to Mecca and taking the young Prophet to her village for nursing. Now, we will continue with the events that followed. Hazrat Halima Sa'diyah lived with her husband Harith, their infant son Abdullah, and daughters Anisa, Hudhaifa, and Jadama, who was also known by her nickname, Shema. Abdullah was honored to be the milk brother of the Prophet. As the Prophet grew older and began walking, Shema often played with him. During one such instance, when Shema teased the Prophet, he bit her shoulder in frustration, leaving a mark. This mark later became a source of blessing for Shema when she was captured during the Battle of Hunain. She revealed her identity as the foster sister of the Prophet and showed the bite mark on her shoulder as proof. Upon recognizing her, the Prophet treated her with great respect, offered her his own cloak to sit on, and said, "If you wish, you may stay with us as my sister, but if you prefer to return to your homeland, you may do so." Shema chose to return to her people, accepted Islam, and was generously gifted slaves, camels, and sheep by the Prophet. While the conversion of Abdullah and Shema to Islam is well documented, the faith of the other siblings remains uncertain. However, Hazrat Harith, the husband of Halima, accepted Islam after the Prophet's prophethood and visited Mecca. Unusual blessings surrounded Hazrat Halima after she took the Prophet into her care. Her frail, aging camel began producing ample milk, which was a stark contrast to its previous condition. Hazrat Halima, R.A., often said that her household was blessed with abundance and prosperity due to the presence of the Prophet. Even during nursing, the Prophet demonstrated fairness, ensuring one breast was left for his milk brother Abdullah. The blessings extended beyond Halima's household. The barren lands of Banu Sa'id turned fertile, and the village animals started producing milk again. Villagers often urged their shepherds to graze their livestock where Halima animals grazed. Once, Halima took the Prophet to the UK's fair, where a soothsayer spotted him and warned people to kill the boy, predicting he would grow up to overpower them. Halima hurriedly left with the Prophet upon hearing this. Hazrat Halima Sa'diyah, a foster mother of honor. Hazrat Halima Sa'diyah holds an esteemed place in history as the foster mother of the Prophet. The Prophet deeply loved her and treated her with immense respect. It is narrated that during his prophethood, an elderly woman visited him in poverty. The Prophet recognized her immediately, stood up in her honor, and exclaimed, "My mother! My mother!" He seated her on his own cloak and showered her with affection. This woman was none other than Halima Sa'diyah. It is also narrated that during the youth of the Prophet, Halima visited Mecca in the presence of Sayyidah Khadijah, who gifted her camels and other items. Later, during her visit to Medina, the Prophet presented her with a flock of sheep and a fully laden camel. Hazrat Halima nursed the Prophet for 2 years, and during this time, his development surpassed that of other children. At the age of 2, he appeared as though he were 4. Although Halima was reluctant to part with him, she returned him to his mother, Sayyidah Amina, after 2 years. However, upon Halima's request, Amina allowed the Prophet to stay with her for a few more months, as Mecca was then facing a plague. This arrangement extended to several years, with the Prophet finally returning to Mecca at the age of 6. The incident of Shaq-e Sadr, the splitting of the chest. One of the extraordinary events during the Prophet's childhood was the splitting of his chest, Shaq-e Sadr. This event occurred at the age of 4 or 5 while he was with Hazrat Halima. Narrating the incident, the Prophet once said, "My early childhood was spent with the tribe of Banu Sa'id. One day, while playing with other children, 2 white-clothed men, angels, approached me with a golden basin filled with snow. They laid me down, opened my chest, and washed my heart with snow. One of them removed a black clot from my heart and said, 'This is the part of Satan in you.' They then sealed my heart with a stamp of light, placed it back in my chest, and healed the wound. The Prophet's milk brother witnessed the incident and informed Halima and Harith, who immediately came to check on the Prophet. Though alarmed, they returned him to his mother in Mecca, fearing further harm. However, Sayyidah Amina reassured them, saying, "Do not worry. This child is destined for greatness, and no harm will come to him." Childhood and tragedies. After the incident of Shaq-e Sadr, the splitting of the chest, Hazrat Halima Sa'diyah returned the Prophet Muhammad to his mother, Hazrat Amina, when he was 4 or 5 years old. Hazrat Amina then entrusted the care of the young Prophet to Amina, who was originally a slave of his father. Her real name was Baraka. When the Prophet was 6 years old, his mother, Hazrat Amina, took him to visit the grave of his late father, Hazrat Abdullah, in Yathrib, later known as Medina. This small caravan consisted of 2 camels and included Amina. They stayed at Darul Nabiga, where Hazrat Abdullah was buried, for about a month. During this time, the Prophet learned how to swim in the ponds of Banu Najjar and played with his maternal cousins in the area. Amina narrates that the Jewish residents of Yathrib observed the young Prophet closely. She overheard one of them say, "This is the Prophet of this Ummah, and this city will be his place of migration." She remembered these words. On the way back, near a place called Abwa, Hazrat Amina fell ill. The caravan halted, and it was there that she passed away. In her final moments, she recited a few lines of poetry that are preserved in Mawahib al-Adniyah. Hazrat Amina was approximately 28 years old at the time of her death and had lived 6 years and 3 months after the birth of the Prophet. Hazrat Amina was buried at the same spot in Abwa. Amina then brought the young Prophet back to Mecca to his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. Thus, the child who had been born an orphan now lost his mother as well, spending only a short time with her. After his mother's death, Amina cared for the Prophet like a mother. The Prophet would later say about her, "She is my mother after my biological mother." When the Prophet was appointed as a prophet, Amina was among the first to embrace Islam. The Prophet freed her from slavery. She was first married to Ubayd bin Zayd bin Amir from the Banu Harith tribe, with whom she had a son, Amina, after whom she was called Amina. After Ubayd's death, the Prophet arranged her marriage to his freed slave, Hazrat Zayd bin Haritha, and they had a son named Usama bin Zayd. Amina passed away during the caliphate of Hazrat Usman. After the death of Hazrat Amina, Abdul Muttalib took the young Prophet into his care. Abdul Muttalib deeply loved the Prophet, even more than his own children, and considered him very special. Historical accounts indicate that Abdul Muttalib believed his grandson would achieve greatness. Once, a delegation from the tribe of Banu Mudlij, known for their skill in physiognomy, examined the footprint of the young Prophet and found it to be strikingly similar to the footprint of Hazrat Ibrahim, alayhi salam, on the Maqam Ibrahim. They advised Abdul Muttalib to take great care of the child. Abdul Muttalib often kept the Prophet close to him, stroking his back and remarking on his exceptional qualities. He would seat him beside him at the Kaaba and ensure he ate with him. During this period, Hazrat Usman bin Affan was also born. The Prophet spent his childhood under the loving care of Abdul Muttalib, and all his uncles and aunts cherished him deeply. However, divine destiny had more challenges in store. When the Prophet was 8 years old, Abdul Muttalib also passed away. The young Prophet, deeply attached to his grandfather, was seen weeping as the funeral procession moved. Abdul Muttalib was 82 years old at the time of his death. This 8-year-old child, orphaned of both parents and now bereft of his grandfather, seemed all alone in the world. He had no siblings, no immediate family to lean on. Yet, who could have known that this seemingly vulnerable child would soon become a source of hope, guidance, and solace for millions? Indeed, every moment of the Prophet's life holds invaluable lessons for us. The Prophet herding sheep for wages. The death of Hazrat Abdul Muttalib holds great significance for multiple reasons. During his time, Qusay bin Kilab had entrusted all the affairs of leadership to his descendant, Abdul Manaf, the great-grandfather of the Prophet. Later, these responsibilities were passed to Abdul Manaf's son, Hashim, who was the Prophet's great-grandfather. Hazrat Hashim had also taken on most of the responsibilities related to the caretaking of the Kaaba during his lifetime. These duties were inherited by Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, who served as the chief of Mecca like his father, Hashim. However, After Abdul-Muttalib's death, the Banu Hashim family lost much of its worldly influence and prestige, marking the first time in decades that the Banu Umayyah overtook the Banu Hashim in status. Leadership in Makkah passed to Harb, the renowned son of Umayyah, who seized control of the Ka'ba's custodianship. Hazrat Abu Sufyan was Harb's son. Harb retained most of the leadership and custodianship duties, leaving only the task of Sakaya, providing water to pilgrims, with Hazrat Abbas, Abdul-Muttalib's youngest son. Hazrat Abdul-Muttalib had 10 sons from various wives. The Prophet's father, Hazrat Abdullah, and Hazrat Ali's father, Hazrat Abu Talib, were full brothers from the same mother. Before his passing, Abdul-Muttalib entrusted the young Prophet to the care of Abu Talib, given their close familial bond. He also called upon his daughters, Hazrat Amina's sisters and the Prophet's paternal aunts, Arwa, Umayma, Bara, Safiya, Attika, and Hakim al-Baida, to ensure the proper upbringing and care of the Prophet. Abu Talib took the Prophet into his home and treated him with immense love and care, as did his wife, Hazrat Fatima bin Asad. She played a significant role in raising the Prophet and loved him deeply. Abu Talib remained a steadfast supporter and protector of the Prophet throughout his life, often prioritizing his well-being over that of his own children. He kept the Prophet close, much like Abdul-Muttalib had done. Abu Talib's family faced financial difficulties due to his large household. Observing these challenges at a young age, the Prophet sought to help. Without hesitation, he began working to ease his uncle's burdens. He would herd sheep for wages, taking the animals to graze in an area called Arakat, near the hill of Ajayat in Makkah. Whatever earnings he made, he would give to his uncle. Herding sheep was not considered a demeaning task in Arab society. Rather, it was a common and acceptable occupation, even for children from noble families. In fact, it was often seen as a recreational activity and part of the Arab way of life. Later in life, the Prophet would fondly recall this simple and fulfilling occupation. On one occasion, while visiting the same wilderness with his companions, the Prophet spoke about it. Hazrat Jabir bin Abdullah narrates, "We were collecting fruit from the Iraq toothbrush tree, when the Prophet said, 'Pick the black ones, for they are the best.' We asked, 'O Messenger of Allah, did you also herd sheep?' He replied, 'Yes, every prophet has herded sheep at some point.' This practice of herding sheep continued for the Prophet until he was around 10 or 12 years old. These humble beginnings not only reflected the simplicity of the Prophet's early life, but also laid the foundation for the extraordinary qualities of leadership, patience, and care that would later define his prophethood. Seeking rain through the Prophet's blessed face. Ibn Asakir narrates from Jilhama bin Arfa, "I came to Makkah when the people were afflicted by drought. The Quraysh approached Abu Talib and said, 'The valley is parched and the people are suffering. Let us go to the Kaaba and pray for rain.' Hazrat Abu Talib emerged, holding a young boy whose face shone like a bright sun, as if a thick cloud had just parted. Around the boy were other children. Abu Talib placed the boy's back against the Kaaba and held his hand, with the boy holding Abu Talib's finger. At that time, the sky was clear, devoid of any clouds. However, suddenly, clouds began to gather from all directions, and it rained so heavily that the valley flooded, rejuvenating the barren land. Later, Abu Talib commemorated this event in his poetry, saying, 'He whose radiant face is sought for rain, a refuge for orphans and a protector of widows, protected from gatherings of entertainment.'" While living with Abu Talib, two notable incidents occurred during the Prophet's early years. Once, during the hot season in Makkah, a gathering of singing and entertainment was arranged. The Prophet, intending to attend, entrusted the care of the sheep he was tending to a fellow shepherd. He walked a considerable distance to the gathering, but, exhausted from the heat, lay under a tree to rest. He fell asleep and did not wake up until the event was over. From that day onward, the Prophet never thought of attending such gatherings of amusement, shielded from idol worship. Another significant incident involved an annual ritual at a site with 2 sacred date palms near a shrine called Bawana. Here, people would offer sacrifices to the idol, shave their heads, and perform other pagan rites. The Prophet was often invited to participate in these rituals, but would always refuse. On one occasion, at the insistence of his uncles and aunts, the Prophet accompanied them to the site, but disappeared from their sight for a while. When they found him, his face bore signs of distress. When asked what had happened, he said, "Whenever I tried to approach the idol, a tall, white figure would appear before me and say, 'O Muhammad, stay back. Do not touch the idol.'" After this incident, the Prophet refrained from attending any gatherings involving idol worship or pagan sacrifices. Encounter with a fortune teller. Once, a renowned soothsayer from the Banu Lahab tribe visited Mecca. People brought their children to him for predictions. Abu Talib also brought the young prophet along with his own children. When the soothsayer saw the prophet, he became deeply intrigued but was momentarily distracted by another task. Later, he asked for the child to be brought to him again. Sensing his unusual curiosity, Abu Talib sent the prophet home. The soothsayer, realizing the missed opportunity, exclaimed, "Bring that child to me. By God, he is destined for greatness." The trade journey to Syria. Like his forefathers, Abu Talib was engaged in trade and would annually journey to Syria for business. When the Prophet was about 12 years old, Abu Talib prepared for such a journey. The young Prophet expressed a desire to accompany him. Initially, Abu Talib, concerned about the hardships of travel for a child, hesitated. However, the Prophet's love for his uncle was so profound that he clung to him tearfully when Abu Talib was about to leave. Unable to separate himself from the boy, Abu Talib decided to take him along. Historians mention that during this journey, a Christian monk named Bahira observed signs in the Prophet that aligned with descriptions of a foretold prophet in ancient scriptures. Bahira warned Abu Talib that if the Jewish or Christian leaders in Syria recognized these signs, the child's life might be endangered. Concerned for the Prophet's safety, Abu Talib curtailed the journey and returned to Mecca. This significant event will, God willing, be detailed further in the next episode. The first journey to Syria and meeting with Bahira the monk. When Prophet Muhammad was about 12 years old, according to some accounts, 12 years, 2 months, and 10 days, his uncle Abu Talib decided to take him along on a trade journey to Syria. The caravan reached near the city of Basra, a major trade center in Syria at that time and part of the Roman Empire. Near Basra, there was a monastery where a Christian monk named Bahira resided. Bahira was a scholar of the scriptures and well-versed in the signs of the last prophet mentioned in the heavenly books. He was known to be a monotheist, free from the practices of polytheism. Bahira's attention. As the caravan approached, Bahira observed an unusual phenomenon. From his monastery, he saw a cloud providing shade to one of the boys in the caravan and following him wherever he went. Bahira immediately realized that this boy was of extraordinary significance. For the first time, Bahira left his monastery and approached the caravan. He carefully observed everyone until his eyes fell upon Prophet Muhammad. He took hold of his hand and exclaimed, "This is the leader of the worlds, the messenger of the Lord of the universe, whom Allah will send as a mercy for all creation." Abu Talib, surprised, asked, "How do you know this?" Bahira replied, "When you all emerged from the mountain pass, I saw a cloud shading this boy. I also noticed that the stones and trees bowed down before him, which they do only for a prophet. Additionally, I have seen the seal of prophethood between his shoulders, as described in our scriptures." A feast for the caravan. Bahira then arranged a feast for the entire caravan. Everyone attended except for Prophet Muhammad, who was tending the camels. Bahira inquired about him, and someone was sent to bring him. When the Prophet arrived, there was no shaded spot left under the tree, so he sat in the sunlight. Immediately, the tree's branches bent down to provide shade for him. Bahira closely observed everything and asked Abu Talib, "What is your relation to this boy?" Abu Talib replied, "He is my son." Bahira said, "This cannot be true because his father cannot be alive." Abu Talib then explained, "He is my nephew. His father, Abdullah, passed away before he was born." Bahira's advice. Bahira advised Abu Talib, "This boy is the foretold prophet. He has all the signs mentioned in our scriptures. I fear that if the Jews or Christians in Syria recognize these signs, they may harm him." Taking Bahira's advice seriously, Abu Talib sent Prophet Muhammad back to Mecca under the protection of some of his companions. After this incident, Abu Talib never took the Prophet on another journey to Syria, fearing for his safety. Another significant event of that year. It was during this same year that Umar ibn al-Khattab, R.A., who would later become one of Islam's greatest leaders and the second caliph, was born. This event marked an important milestone in the life of Prophet Muhammad, highlighting his exceptional status even in his early years. The Battle of Fijar and the Pact of Hilf al-Fudul. The purity of Prophet Muhammad before prophethood. Authentic narrations confirm that Prophet Muhammad's youth and adolescence remained free from all the immoral practices, indulgences, and undesirable behaviors common in the pre-Islamic era. Despite living in a society steeped in depravity and vice, Allah protected him from such evils. While his peers were engrossed in the frivolities of youth, he stood apart with his righteousness and purity, emerging as the most virtuous individual in Mecca. He never participated in the idolatry or polytheistic rituals practiced by his people during their worship at the Kaaba. Instead, he maintained his monotheistic belief and refrained from acts contrary to the principles of Abrahamic faith. Even before his prophethood, Allah safeguarded him from all forms of indecency, corruption, and shirk, polytheism. Participation in the Battle of Fijar. At the age of 20, Prophet Muhammad witnessed a fierce battle between the Quraysh and the tribe of Khazailan, known as the Battle of Fijar. The allied tribe of Banu Kinana supported the Quraysh. This battle took place during the sacred months when fighting and bloodshed were prohibited, hence the name Fijar, violating sanctity. Each subtribe of the Quraysh formed its own battalion, with Banu Hashim being led by Prophet Muhammad's uncle, Zubair ibn Abdul Muttalib. The overall command of the Quraysh forces was under Harb ibn Umayyah, a prominent leader and warrior, and the grandfather of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, R.A. According to Ibn Hisham, the conflict began over a murder at the marketplace of Ukais. Both sides blamed each other, leading to an escalation that resulted in war. Though Prophet Muhammad participated in the battle alongside his uncles, he did not engage in fighting. Instead, he helped by gathering and handing arrows to his uncles. His abstention from fighting was due to the sacredness of the months and the fact that both sides were polytheists. Allah protected him from purposeless bloodshed, as fighting in Islam is only prescribed to elevate Allah's word and establish justice. The battle began with Khazailan having the upper hand, but as the day progressed, the Quraysh gained the advantage and eventually won. However, elders on both sides intervened and proposed peace. A truce was reached wherein both sides counted their dead, and compensation, blood money, was paid for the excess fatalities. Participation in the Pact of Hilf al-Fudul. Arabia was plagued by endless tribal conflicts and senseless bloodshed, which destroyed countless families and ingrained cruelty into their culture. After the Battle of Fijar, some noble-hearted individuals grew weary of this meaningless violence and sought to revive an ancient pact called Hilf al-Fudul. This pact, originally initiated by virtuous individuals named Fadl ibn Fudala, Fadl ibn Wadaway, and Fadl ibn Harith, aimed to establish justice and curb oppression. The pact was named Hilf al-Fudul because all the initiators shared the name Fadl. After returning to Mecca from the battle, Prophet Muhammad's uncle, Zubair ibn Abdul Muttalib, proposed renewing this agreement. Representatives of the clans of Banu Hashim, Banu Zurah, and Banu Taym gathered at the house of Abdullah ibn Judin, a respected elder. They pledged to support the oppressed and ensure that no tyrant would be allowed to act unjustly in Mecca. Prophet Muhammad, who attended this meeting, later remarked, "I witnessed the pact of al-Fudul at the house of Abdullah ibn Judin. Even if I were given red camels, a great wealth, I would not prefer it over this pact. If I were called to such a pact in Islam, I would respond positively. The reason for Hilf al-Feudal. One of the reasons behind this pact was an incident involving a merchant from the Zubayd tribe. He brought goods to Mecca, and a Qurayshi man, as Ibn purchased them but refused to pay. The merchant sought help from the clans of Abd al-Dar, Maksum, Juma, Sam, and Adi, but none assisted him. In desperation, he climbed Mount Abu Kubais and recited verses describing his plight. Moved by his plea, Zubair ibn Abdul Muttalib took action, rallying the aforementioned clans to convene and form the pact. They not only ensured justice for the merchant, but also established a framework to prevent such injustices in the future. Significance of Hilf al-Feudal. This pact occurred 4 months after the Battle of Fijar and 20 years before the Prophet's declaration of prophethood. It is considered a milestone in pre-Islamic Arabia for promoting justice and curbing tyranny. The Hilf al-Feudal remains a symbol of moral excellence in an era otherwise marked by violence and oppression. Prophet Muhammad's endorsement of the pact highlights its importance in Islamic history. The title of As-Siddiq and Al-Amin. In the previous episode, 2 significant events from the youth of Prophet Muhammad were discussed. This episode sheds light on further aspects of his early life and character during his youth. Allah safeguarded all his prophets throughout their lives from idolatry, misguidance, and the ignorance of their times. Even before their prophethood, they were recognized as the most virtuous and righteous individuals among their people, as evident from the stories of prophets like Ibrahim and Yusuf alayhi salam. Similarly, the seal of the prophets, Muhammad, remained pure and free from all forms of shirk, polytheism, idol worship, and other sinful practices during his childhood and youth. His noble character, honesty, integrity, and truthfulness earned him immense respect in society. People would not call him by his name but addressed him as As-Siddiq, the truthful, and Al-Amin, the trustworthy. As narrated in Ibn Hisham's Seerah, the Prophet Muhammad grew up under the protection and care of Allah. He was kept away from the impurities of ignorance and all forms of immorality because Allah had destined him to be honored with prophethood and every kind of dignity. He became a perfect man, excelling in morals, lineage, forbearance, truthfulness, and trustworthiness. He remained distant from every vice and lowly conduct to the extent that he became famously known as As-Siddiq al-Amin. Incident with Zayd bin Haritha, R.A. Zayd bin Haritha narrates that during the era of ignorance, when the idolaters of Mecca would perform the tawaf of the Kaaba, they would touch the idol's Isaf and Naila placed near it. Once, while performing tawaf with the Prophet, Zayd touched the idols. The Prophet forbade him from doing so. Zayd states, "I wanted to see what would happen, so I touched the idols again. The Prophet rebuked me firmly and said, 'Did I not forbid you from doing this?' By Allah, after that day, I never touched an idol until Allah honored the Prophet with prophethood and revealed his message to him." Mustadrak al-Hakim, Volume 3, page 216. Refusal to eat from idol offerings. On another occasion, the Quraysh invited the Prophet to a feast. However, he refused to partake in the food because the Quraysh would slaughter animals in the name of their idols. His pure and refined nature made him averse to consuming anything associated with idol worship. A life of purity and integrity. From the very beginning, like all prophets, Muhammad exhibited a remarkably virtuous nature, free from disbelief, shirk, and all immoral or indecent acts. His purity of character and unwavering commitment to truth and justice set him apart even in a society rife with ignorance and vice. A non-Muslim perspective on his character. Mrs. Annie Besant, a renowned English author and leader of the Theosophical Society in India, wrote, "What has profoundly impressed me about the Prophet Muhammad is the attribute that earned him the title Al-Amin, the most trustworthy, from his countrymen. No quality can surpass this, and no trait is more deserving of emulation by both Muslims and non-Muslims. A person who embodies truth is undoubtedly the noblest of beings and the most deserving to be the bearer of the divine message. Summary. The title As-Sadiq al-Amin given to Prophet Muhammad by his people highlights his impeccable honesty and integrity. His aversion to idol worship, refusal to partake in anything linked to shirk, and adherence to high moral standards reflect his unique status even before prophethood. These qualities not only established his greatness among his contemporaries, but also affirmed his worthiness to carry the message of Islam to the world. Youth and marriage to Khadijah, Razi Allah. In his childhood, the Prophet Muhammad did not have a specific occupation. However, it is widely reported that he used to tend sheep. He herded sheep for the Banu Sa'd and the people of Mecca for a few kyats, a small amount of money. When he reached youth, the Prophet sought a means of livelihood. Since Mecca was a barren valley and agriculture was not possible, he adopted trade like his ancestors. The Prophet invested his father's inheritance in trade and participated in trade fairs, traveling for this purpose. Throughout his career, he remained known for his honesty and integrity. His trading partner, Abdullah bin Abi al-Hamsa, narrates an incident. I once entered into a trade agreement with him, but before finalizing it, I had to leave for some urgent work. I asked him to wait for me there, but I got so busy that I forgot. 3 days later, I passed by that place and found him waiting for me. Feeling ashamed, I approached him, but all he said was, "You have caused me trouble, as I have been waiting here for 3 days." Qais bin al-Saib al-Makhzumi, another trade partner of the Prophet, described him as the best companion, always trustworthy and honest in dealings. Khadijah bint Khuwaylid, R.A., a wealthy widow of the Quraysh tribe, had inherited a successful business from her father. Known as At-Tahira, the Pure One, she would hire traders to manage her merchandise. Upon learning of the Prophet's honesty and excellent character, she sent him a proposal to manage her trade to Syria, offering him better wages than others. The Prophet, with the advice of his uncle, accepted the offer and embarked on the journey with her servant Seerah. Upon returning from the trip, Khadijah, R.A., observed unprecedented blessings and profit in her trade. After hearing about the Prophet's virtues and character from Seerah, she became convinced that he was the perfect life partner she had been seeking. At the time, the Prophet was 25 years old, while Khadijah, R.A., was either 28 or 40, according to various reports. Inspired by his noble qualities, she sent a marriage proposal through her friend Nafisa bint Munya. The Prophet expressed his consent, and his uncle Hamza, R.A., arranged the marriage. The ceremony was attended by prominent members of the Quraysh. The dowry, according to different accounts, was 20 camels for 100 dinars or 500 dirhams. After their marriage, the Prophet moved to Khadijah's, R.A., house. She presented him with a servant, Zayd bin Haritha, R.A., who later became one of the Prophet's closest companions. Zayd's story is remarkable. He had been kidnapped in his childhood and sold into slavery. Khadijah's nephew gifted him to her, and she gave him to the Prophet. When Zayd's family discovered his whereabouts, they came to take him back. However, Zayd chose to stay with the Prophet, who publicly declared him as his adopted son in front of the Quraysh at the Kaaba. Khadijah, R.A., was the Prophet's first wife, and he remained married to her exclusively until her passing. All of the Prophet's children, except Ibrahim, R.A., were born to Khadijah, R.A. They were Qasim, R.A., Zainab, R.A., Ruqayya, R.A., Kulthum, R.A., Fatima, R.A., and Abdullah, R.A. All sons passed away in childhood. Among the daughters, Fatima, R.A., survived the Prophet by 6 months, while the others passed away during his lifetime. The dispute over the black stone and the appointment of the Prophet as arbitrator. When the Prophet was 35 years old, the Quraysh began rebuilding the Kaaba. The reason for this was that the Kaaba was in a dilapidated state. It was a low wall with no roof, originally built during the time of Prophet Ismail, A.S., and was only about 9 hands in height. Over time, the building had deteriorated, and its walls had cracked. That year, a severe flood occurred, which was directed towards the Kaaba. It was feared that the Kaaba might collapse at any moment, so the Quraysh were compelled to rebuild it to maintain its prestige and significance. During this period, a Roman ship was struck by a storm and crashed at the port of Shuaibah, the old name for Jeddah. The Quraysh learned about the incident and decided to purchase the planks of the ship to use in the construction of the Kaaba. Among the survivors of the storm was a skilled Egyptian carpenter who offered his services for the construction. Additionally, there was a carpenter in Mecca who could assist with the work. At this point, the Quraysh made a collective decision to ensure that only lawful funds would be used in the Kaaba's reconstruction. They agreed not to use money earned through immoral activities, such as the wages of prostitutes, interest, or any stolen wealth. To make the task easier, the work was divided among the different clans. The construction of the door wall was assigned to Banu Abd Manaf and Banu Zurah, the wall between the Black Stone, Hajar al-Aswad, and the Yemeni corner was assigned to Banu Maksum and Banu Taym, and the back wall was given to Banu Sam and Banu Hamer. The task of constructing the side of the Kaaba known as the Hatim was assigned to Banu Abd al-Dar, Banu Asad, and Banu Adi. In order to start the new construction, it was necessary to demolish the old structure. However, the people feared tearing down the old building due to the recent memory of the king of Yemen, Abraha, who had come with elephants to destroy the Kaaba but had met a disastrous end. Finally, it was Walid bin al-Mughira of the Maksum clan who took the initiative and said, "O Allah, we intend nothing but good." He then began tearing down some of the corners. When no calamity befell him, others followed suit, and by the time they reached the foundations of the Kaaba, the demolition was complete and construction began. As the walls were built up to the height where the black stone would be placed, a fierce dispute broke out among the tribes. Each tribe wanted the honor of placing the black stone in its rightful position. The dispute escalated to the point where swords were drawn. It was customary among the Arabs that when someone swore an oath to fight, they would dip their fingers in a bowl of blood. Some of the claimants even performed this ritual. The dispute continued for 4 days, with work halted. On the 5th day, the elder of the Quraysh, Abu Umayyah bin al-Mughira, suggested that the first person to enter through the Bab Banu Shaiba, the door of Banu Shaiba, in the morning should be chosen as an arbitrator. All the tribes agreed to this suggestion. The next morning, all the leaders of the tribes gathered at the agreed location, and by the will of Allah, the first person to enter was none other than the Prophet Muhammad. When the people saw him, they cried out, "This is the trustworthy one. We are pleased with him. This is Muhammad." Consider this, the honor and dignity that each tribe had been vying for, even going so far as to swear blood oaths and prepare for violence, was now peacefully entrusted to the Prophet. When the matter was presented to him, the Prophet removed his cloak from his shoulder and, with his own hands, placed the black stone in its rightful place. He then instructed that representatives from the 4 major clans be chosen to lift the cloth, and each representative took a corner of the cloth. Together, they carried it to the point where the stone was to be placed. When they reached the designated spot, the Prophet lifted the black stone and installed it in its place. This act symbolized that the final and most significant piece of the Kaaba would be placed by the hands of the Prophet. The elderly and experienced leaders of the Quraysh were astounded by his wisdom, decisiveness, and impartiality. All of them, in unison, praised and congratulated him. The age of ignorance and the Prophet's practices. After the construction of the Kaaba, the idol-worshipping people of Mecca began decorating it. They painted various images on the walls of the Kaaba, including depictions of angels and various prophets, such as Prophet Ibrahim and Prophet Ismail, alayhi salam, who were shown casting arrows for divination. They also created images of Lady Maryam, alayha salam, and Prophet Isa, alayhi salam. Additionally, 360 idols were placed around the Kaaba, each representing different tribes, turning the Kaaba into a multi-religious temple. The hedonism of the Banu Jurhum tribe was also highlighted, with even the criminals of the Kaaba being deified. One example is Naila bint Dyke, a beautiful woman who would display her beauty in semi-naked clothing while performing the tawaf around the Kaaba. She had a following of admirers, including a young chief named Asaf bin Bagia, who once became so infatuated during the tawaf that he overstepped his bounds. The Banu Jurum people, drunk and heedless, did not protest this desecration, but instead proudly narrated the story of Asaf and Naila's love. After their deaths, idols of Asaf and Naila were made and worshipped as symbols of love and affection, and they were placed near the Zamzam well. The Prophet, witnessing the degradation of his people, would become deeply saddened and distressed. To avoid their actions, he would often retreat to the outskirts of Mecca to spend time in solitude. There were a few other individuals with sound minds who also disapproved of these practices, and they would keep the Prophet company. Among them was Abu Bakr, R.A., who was 2 years younger than the Prophet and shared his concern for the moral decline of their people. After the Prophet's mission began, Abu Bakr, R.A., was the first to embrace Islam. Similarly, Hakim bin Hizam, the nephew of Lady Khadijah, was also an honorable person in Mecca, 5 years older than the Prophet. He shared a natural harmony with the Prophet and later accepted Islam after the conquest of Mecca. Another friend of the Prophet, Zumayd bin Thalaba, a physician and surgeon, came to the Prophet after the Quraysh had labeled him a madman. He inquired about the Prophet's condition, and upon hearing a few verses from the Quran, he embraced Islam. Other notable companions who despised idol worship included Su'aib bin Sinan, R.A., Ammar bin Yasser, R.A., and several others, such as Uthman bin Affan, R.A., Zubair bin Awam, R.A., Abdul Rahman bin Awaf, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Jafar bin Abi Talib, Ubaydullah bin Yash, and Abu Salma, R.A. Even outside Mecca, Abu Dar of Banu Ghaffar was like-minded, as was Salman al-Farsi, R.A., who traveled from Persia in search of the truth and eventually embraced Islam after meeting the Prophet. Although the Kaaba had become a place for 360 idols, the Prophet never bowed to these idols nor participated in any of the other pagan rituals. The Quraysh, considering themselves superior, had a rule that during the pilgrimage, it was not obligatory for the Quraysh to go to Arafat. Those coming from outside had to adopt the Quraysh's clothing, or they would have to perform tawaf around the Kaaba in the nude. As a result, tawaf in the nude became a common practice, but the Prophet never participated in such customs. In the era of ignorance, storytelling was a popular pastime. At night, people would gather in a place after finishing their daily work, and a storyteller, skilled in this art, would begin his narrative. People would eagerly listen to these stories throughout the night. Once, when the Prophet was a child, he wanted to join one of these gatherings. However, there was a wedding celebration along the way, and as he stopped to observe, he fell asleep. When he awoke, it was already morning. This was the only time, in his entire life, that he had any inclination towards these gatherings. His natural inclination always kept him above such distractions. The Prophet never drank alcohol, never ate from the meat sacrificed at idols' altars, nor did he participate in the festivals or fairs held in honor of idols. From the very beginning, he had an intense aversion to false deities, to the point that even hearing the names of Lata and Uzza, 2 prominent idols, was repulsive to him. However, when the Quraysh observed good practices, such as fasting on the day of Ashura, the Prophet also participated in it. This was the natural inclination and sound disposition of the Prophet. However, for the establishment of a higher, universal law, a more profound mission was required. During this period, other individuals like Waraka, Zayd, and Uthman bin Huwarith also sought the truth, realizing the futility of idol worship. They set out in search of the true faith, but their efforts were in vain. Waraka and Uthman became Christians, and Zayd, while dying, lamented, "O God, if I had known how to worship you, I would have done so." The Prophet was deeply concerned about this, and his nature began to lean towards solitude. Understanding his temperament, Lady Khadijah, R.A., supported him, and the prophet would often retreat to the mountains, away from the city's chaos, to find peace and solace for his restless soul. The period of solitude and reflection. Up to this point, the prophet had become mentally and spiritually distanced from his people. He found no peace or satisfaction in the idle, idolatrous beliefs and baseless concepts prevalent in his society. However, there was no clear path, no defined way, and no balanced route that he could follow with tranquility and contentment. As a result, the prophet developed a deep affection for solitude. As he neared the age of 40, his inclination towards seclusion grew stronger. Jabal al-Nur, the Mountain of Light, located 3 miles outside of Mecca, houses a cave called Hira. The word Hira means search or quest. This cave, measuring 4 yards in length and nearly 2 yards in width, became significant in the life of the prophet. Just as certain mountains had spiritual importance in the lives of previous prophets, 2 mountains hold great significance in the prophet's life: Jabal al-Nur, Hira, and Jabal al-Thur. Hira is important because the prophet spent a period of time in solitude there before receiving the first revelation, while Thur holds significance due to the prophet's stay there during the migration to Medina. Similar to the connection of certain mountains with earlier prophets, such as the meeting of Adam, A.S., and Hawa on Jabal al-Rahmah, Noah, alayhi salam, Ark resting on Jabal Judi, and the special relation of the mountains of Safa and Marwa with Ibrahim, alayhi salam, Hajara, and Ismail. The mountains in the life of the prophet were no less significant. The cave of Hira holds special significance because it is where the prophet spent his time in reflection, and it is here that the angel Jibreel, alayhi salam, first brought the revelation. The cave is located about 2,000 feet above sea level, is rectangular in shape, and faces the direction of the Kaaba. Inside, it is roughly 4 yards long, nearly 2 yards wide, and tall enough for a person to stand and pray comfortably. The prophet would go to the cave of Hira, spending months there in meditation. He would bring food with him, and when it ran out, he would return home and then head back to his solitude. He engaged in deep contemplation, seeking answers to the existential questions about life and the universe. In Sahih Bukhari, it is narrated that the prophet spent time in the cave of Hira practicing tahanath, a form of worship. What was this worship? It is explained in the commentary on Bukhari that the prophet's worship was one of deep reflection and pondering. It was the same form of worship that his grandfather, Ibrahim, practiced before his prophethood. He would observe the stars and the moon, and when they disappeared, he would exclaim, "I do not want anything transient. I turn my face towards the one who created the heavens and the earth." Surah Al-An'am 79. The prophet's grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, used to observe itikaf in the cave of Hira during the month of Ramadan. This practice of solitude and contemplation began for the prophet after the birth of his daughter, Ruqayyah. The period of tahanath, marked by deep devotion to God, lasted for 5 years, but during the last 6 months of this period, the prophet was fully engrossed in worship and seclusion. It was during these 6 months that the prophet began to experience dreams that would later come true. According to authentic traditions and biographers, during this period of spiritual development, the prophet began to receive true dreams, Ruya as-Siddiqa, which are considered to be a part of prophethood. These dreams were significant and often became clear in their interpretation shortly afterward. As the prophet approached the age of 40, he was being prepared by divine wisdom for the coming of revelation, and Allah chose him to become the mercy to the worlds. Under the shade of prophethood and messengership. According to the lunar calendar, when the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam, turned 40 years and 1 day old, which is considered the age of maturity and the common age for the appointment of prophets, signs of prophethood began to manifest. This state continued for 6 months. By the 3rd year of his seclusion in the cave of Hira, he was honored with prophethood. Most biographers agree that this occurred on the evening of Monday, 9th Rabi al-Awwal, 41st year of the Common Era, corresponding to February 12, 610 AD. On that fateful night in the cave of Hira, the angel Gabriel, A.S., appeared and declared, "O Muhammad, PBUH, accept glad tidings, for you are Allah's messenger, and I am Jibreel." Another opinion holds that this event occurred in the month of Ramadan. Research suggests that the incident took place on the 21st night of Ramadan, which coincided with August 10th, 610 AD. This view is more accurate, as Allah states in the Quran. The month of Ramadan is that in which the Quran was revealed. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:185. Moreover, Allah further declares, "Indeed, we sent it, the Quran, down during the night of decree, Laylatul Qadr." Surah Al-Qadr 97. It is well established that Laylatul Qadr occurs in the last 10 nights of Ramadan, particularly on the odd nights. Now, let us hear the details of this life-altering event from the words of Aisha, which marked the beginning of prophethood and led to the eradication of ignorance and polytheism, altering the course of history forever. The first revelation. Aisha narrates that the angel Jibreel came to the prophet and commanded, "Read." The prophet replied, "I am not learned." The prophet, alayhi salam, then described the event, saying, "He seized me and pressed me so firmly that I felt my strength being drained. Then he released me and said, 'Read.' I replied again, 'I am not learned.' He grasped me again and squeezed me tightly, then released me and said, 'Read.' I again responded, 'I am not learned.' On the third occasion, Jibreel, A.S., embraced him tightly and then released him, proclaiming, 'Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of blood. Read. And your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not." Surah Al-Alaq 96:1-5. This unexpected event left the prophet, PBUH, deeply shaken. Never had he imagined being chosen as a prophet. Overwhelmed with awe, he left the cave, trembling in fear. As he descended from the mountain, he heard a voice calling him, "O Muhammad, PBUH, you are the messenger of Allah, and I am Jibreel." He looked up and saw Jibreel, alayhi salam, standing on the horizon in the form of a man. After this declaration, Hazrat Jibreel disappeared from sight. Terrified, the prophet returned home to Hazrat Khadijah and said, "Cover me, cover me." She wrapped him in a cloak until his fear subsided. He then narrated the entire incident, saying, "What has happened to me? I fear for my life." Khadijah, R.A., reassured him with utmost confidence and love, saying, "No, by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You uphold ties of kinship, bear the burdens of the weak, assist the destitute, honor your guests, and support those who stand for truth." Seeking confirmation from Waraka bin Nawfal, Khadijah then took the prophet to her cousin, Waraka bin Nawfal, a Christian scholar who had translated the Torah and Gospel into Arabic. He had abandoned idol worship in favor of monotheism. By that time, he was old and had lost his eyesight. Khadijah, R.A., said, "Brother, listen to your nephew's account." Waraka asked, "Nephew, what have you seen?" The prophet narrated the incident, after which Waraka exclaimed, "This is the same angel, Jibreel, whom Allah had sent to Moses. I wish I were young when your people will drive you out." Surprised, the prophet, alayhi salam, asked, "Will my people drive me out?" Waraka replied, "Yes. Whenever a man brought a message like yours, he faced hostility. If I am alive when that day comes, I will stand by you with all my might." Shortly after, Waraka passed away, and revelation paused for some time. This marked the beginning of the greatest revolution in human history, the advent of the final messenger, whose message would illuminate the world till the end of time. The first to embrace Islam. In the previous episode, we missed mentioning an important detail. When angel Gabriel, peace be upon him, first appeared in the cave of Hira with the divine revelation, he struck the ground with his foot, causing water to emerge. He then performed ablution in front of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who followed suit. Thereafter, Angel Jibreel led him in a 2-unit prayer with 4 prostrations. With the descent of the first revelation, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, became fully aware of his divine mission. His visit to Waraka bin Nawfal was both an act of honoring Khadijah's, may Allah be pleased with her, wish and a step toward the beginning of his prophetic duty. Waraka became the first link in this chain of divine guidance. After receiving his prophetic mission, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, needed individuals to affirm his truth. This honor was first granted to Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, and Waraka bin Nawfal. Upon returning home and narrating the incident of revelation, Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, reassured him by recalling his noble character and comforting him that Allah would protect him from all harm. She declared, "By the one who holds Khadijah's soul in his hand, you are undoubtedly the Prophet of Allah. Rejoice, for the mission entrusted to you is the truth, and surely you are the messenger of Allah." Waraka not only affirmed the Prophet's mission but also expressed his longing to support him. However, he passed away shortly afterward. Since he confirmed the Prophet's prophethood and wished to aid him, many scholars consider Waraka among the companions, Sahaba. The first woman to embrace Islam was the Prophet's devoted wife, Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her. Immediately after the Prophet's, peace and blessings be upon him, appointment, she and their 4 daughters accepted Islam. Khadijah remained the Prophet's closest supporter and advisor for 10 years during his 13-year stay in Mecca. On the 2nd day after his prophethood, young Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, saw the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, praying and asked about it. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, explained, "This is the religion of Allah, the same religion brought by his prophets. I invite you to worship Allah alone." Ali spent the night in contemplation, and by the next morning, he embraced Islam. At the time, he was between 8 and 10 years old. The third person in the Prophet's household to accept Islam was Zayd bin Haritha, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet's freed slave and adopted son. He was originally from the Banu Qudaway tribe, but bandits kidnapped him and sold him in the market of Ukais. Khadijah's nephew, Hakim bin Hizam, may Allah be pleased with him, purchased him and gave him to his aunt, who later entrusted him to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. When Zayd's father learned of his whereabouts, he came to retrieve him, but Zayd chose to stay with the Prophet, who treated him like a son. He was known as Zayd bin Muhammad, until the Quranic injunction in Surah Al-Ahzab directed that individuals should be identified by their biological fathers. Zayd's first marriage was to the Prophet's maidservant, Amina, may Allah be pleased with her, from whom their son Usama was born. Later, he married Zainab bint Yash, the Prophet's cousin, but their union ended in divorce. He was martyred in the Battle of Mu'tah, 8 and he is the only companion whose name is mentioned in the Quran. Among free men, the first to embrace Islam was the Prophet's close friend, Abu Bakr bin Abi Quhafa, may Allah be pleased with him. A wealthy merchant, an expert in genealogy, and a person of wisdom and generosity, Abu Bakr did not hesitate for a moment when the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, presented Islam to him. The Prophet later stated, "I invited many to Islam, and most hesitated, except for Abu Bakr. He accepted without hesitation." Ibn Sa'd recorded that when Abu Bakr accepted Islam, he possessed 40,000 dirhams, which he spent in the cause of Islam. His unwavering companionship earned him the title of As-Siddiq, the Truthful. He remained by the Prophet's side during the difficult migration to Medina, sharing the dangers of the journey and earning the title Thani Ithnain, the second of the two, as mentioned in the Quran. Through Abu Bakr's, the interruption and resumption of revelation. After the first revelation, no further revelation was sent down for several months. This period is known as Fatra al-Wa'i, or interruption of revelation. Scholars differ on its duration. Some say it lasted 6 months, while others suggest it could have been up to 3 years. During this period, the prophet remained saddened and anxious. He wondered, "Has my Lord become displeased with me?" The famous scholar, Hafiz ibn Hajar, explains that the temporary cessation of revelation had a purpose: to allow the prophet to overcome the fear that had overtaken him, to create in his heart a longing and eagerness for the return of revelation. Fath al-Bari, Volume 1, page 27. Once this goal was achieved and the prophet began eagerly anticipating revelation, Allah sent down another revelation. Seerah of the Prophet Muhammad. The resumption of revelation. The prophet narrates, "I spent a month in retreat at the cave of Hira. When my retreat was completed, I descended. As I reached the valley, I heard a voice calling me. I looked to my right, there was nothing. I looked to my left, there was nothing. I looked ahead and behind me, there was nothing. Then I raised my gaze toward the sky, and I saw the same angel, Jibreel, who had come to me in Hira. He was sitting on a throne between the sky and the earth. Upon seeing this sight, I was overcome with fear and immediately rushed home to Khadijah. I said, 'Cover me, and pour cold water over me.' She covered me with a blanket and poured cold water over me to calm me down." The revelation of Surah Al-Mudaththir. At that moment, Allah revealed the following verses of Surah Al-Mudaththir. Surah Al-Mudaththir, 1-5. Translation: O you who are covered in a cloak, arise and warn, and proclaim the greatness of your Lord, and keep your garments clean, and shun all filth, idolatry. This event occurred before prayer was made obligatory. After this, revelations began to come continuously. Sahih Bukhari, Tafsir of Surah Al-Mudaththir. From prophethood to messengership. With the revelation of Surah Al-Alaq, the prophet was granted prophethood. With the revelation of Surah Al-Mudaththir, he was appointed as a messenger, meaning he was now commanded to convey the message of Islam to the people. These verses marked the beginning of his mission. They contained a divine call from Allah, commanding the prophet to rise from comfort and take on the great responsibility of calling people to Islam. O you who are wrapped in a cloak, arise and warn. It was as if Allah was saying, "This life is not for comfort. Now is the time to spread the message. Sleep and rest are over. Now begins the struggle, sacrifice, and hardship." Hearing this call, the prophet rose and never rested again. For over 20 years, he dedicated himself completely to the mission of spreading Allah's message. He never sought personal comfort. Rather, his life became a continuous struggle for the sake of Islam. May Allah reward the prophet on behalf of all of humanity in the best way. Ameen. The different forms of revelation. Revelation was sent to the prophet in various ways. In Sahih Bukhari, it is narrated, Sayyidah Aisha reported that once Harith bin Hisham asked the prophet, "How does revelation come to you?" The prophet replied, "Sometimes I hear a sound like the ringing of a bell, and this form of revelation is the hardest on me. Once it ends, I remember exactly what was said. Sometimes, the angel appears before me in the form of a man and speaks to me, and I remember what he says." The intensity of revelation. Sayyidah Aisha narrates, "I witnessed revelation descending upon the prophet on extremely cold days. Yet when the revelation ended, his blessed forehead would be drenched in sweat." In another narration, she describes, when revelation would descend upon the prophet, his breathing would become heavy, his blessed face would turn pale like a dried palm leaf, his front teeth would shiver due to the intensity, and sweat would pour from him like pearls. At times, revelation was so intense that if it came while he was riding a camel, the weight of the revelation would cause the camel to kneel down. Once, revelation descended while the prophet was resting his thigh on Zayd bin Thabit's thigh, and Zayd felt such a heavy burden that he feared his leg would be crushed. The audible sound of revelation. Sometimes, those around the prophet could sense the revelation. Sayyidina Umar reported, when revelation descended upon the prophet, a sound like the buzzing of bees could be heard near his face. Forms of revelation. Hijab 1 through a mysterious sound, like a ringing bell. This was the most intense form of revelation. The prophet would hear a sound, and once it ended, the words of revelation would be imprinted in his heart. Hijab 2 through an angel in human form. Sometimes, Angel Jibreel would appear in the form of a human and deliver Allah's message. He often took the form of Dihya al-Kalbi, a well-known companion. Hijab 3 through Jibreel in his original form. This only happened 3 times in the Prophet's lifetime. When the Prophet wished to see Jibreel in his original form, during the night of Ascension, Miraj. At the beginning of prophethood, in Mecca, a jihad. The third incident has weaker authentication. 4 through true dreams. Before Quranic revelation began, the Prophet would see true dreams. Whatever he saw in his dream would come true as clearly as the morning light. 5 directly into his heart, Naf Fi al-Ruh. Sometimes, Jibreel would inspire words directly into the Prophet's heart. The Prophet said, Jibreel, inspired in my heart that no soul will die until it receives its complete sustenance. So seek your livelihood in a lawful manner. Shu'ab al-Aman, Hadith number 1190. Direct conversation with Allah without an angel. Similar to how Allah spoke directly to Prophet Musa, he also spoke to the Prophet during the Miraj, Ascension. This is when the command of Salah, prayer, was given. Zad al-Ma'ad, Volume 1, page 18, Ibn al-Qayyim. 7 Seeing Allah without a veil, disputed opinion. Some scholars mention a 7th form, where Allah directly addressed the Prophet without a veil. However, there has been scholarly debate over whether this actually occurred. Conclusion. Revelation was an intense, divine experience that transformed the world forever. The Prophet endured great physical and emotional strain during this process, but he bore it with patience and perseverance. These different forms of revelation highlight the unique and miraculous nature of the divine messages he received. May Allah send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet, who bore this responsibility with such dedication. Ameen. Palms up together. 3 years of secret preaching. After the revelation of the previous verses of Surah Al-Mudaththir, the Messenger of Allah rose to call people towards Allah. Since his tribe was stubborn, indulged in idol worship, and adhered strictly to the ways of their forefathers, the task ahead required great wisdom. Their pride, arrogance, and leadership position in religious matters across the Arabian Peninsula meant that an open call to Islam could provoke intense resistance. Thus, it was prudent to begin the mission secretly, avoiding sudden unrest in Mecca. For 3 years following his prophethood, the Prophet, PBUH, continued his mission in secrecy. Although there was no explicit command for open preaching after the first revelation, the Prophet still privately advised people against idol worship, emphasizing that Allah is one, without partners, and that only He deserves worship. In the early days, those who embraced the message were called Musaddiq, the one who affirms the truth, rather than Muslim or believer. The essence of the message included Tawheed, monotheism. Allah is one in His essence and attributes, without any partners. Prophethood, acknowledging Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, as the messenger of Allah. Spreading the message. Those who believed were encouraged to invite others from the darkness of polytheism to the light of Islam. The task of fulfilling this divine responsibility was not without challenges. Unlike previous prophets who either confined their efforts to preaching or led their people away from oppressive regimes, the mission of Prophet Muhammad was to remain amidst his people and guide not only Arabia, but the entire world. This required careful planning and gradual progress. The first converts. The Prophet, PBUH, initially invited those closest to him, who were already familiar with his character and truthfulness. Khadijah bint Khuwaylid, his beloved wife, and the first to accept Islam. Ali ibn Abi Talib, his cousin, raised under his care. Zayd ibn Haritha, his freed slave and adopted son. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, his closest friend and companion, who accepted Islam without hesitation. Abu Bakr's role in the early spread of Islam. Abu Bakr, well respected for his integrity and generosity, became instrumental in spreading Islam. His social standing attracted many influential figures to Islam, including Uthman ibn Affan, Zubair ibn al-Awwam, Abdur Rahman ibn Awaf, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Talha ibn Ubaidullah. These companions formed the core group of early believers. Other early converts. Gradually, more people from various clans of the Quraysh embraced Islam. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, Abu Salama ibn Abd al-Asad, and his wife Salama, Asma bint Abi Bakr, Arkam ibn Abi al-Arkam, Uthman ibn Mazun and his brothers, Sa'id ibn Zaid and his wife Fatima bint al-Khattab, the sister of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Khabab ibn al-Arat, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib and his wife Asma bin Umays. Early converts from outside the Quraysh. Some of the earliest converts from outside the Quraysh included Ayman Baraka, the Ethiopian caretaker of the Prophet, Abu Dar al-Ghafari, Abdullah ibn Mas'udi, Bilal ibn Rabah, the Ethiopian slave who later became the Prophet's muezzin, Sahib ibn Sinan, Ammar ibn Yasir and his parents, Yasir and Sumaya, Raziyallahu Anhum, the first martyr of Islam. Secret worship and growing opposition. During this secret phase, Muslims would pray in secluded valleys. On one occasion, the Prophet, PBUH, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, RA, were praying in a valley when Abu Talib, the Prophet's uncle, came across them. Upon inquiry, the Prophet explained his divine mission. Although Abu Talib did not embrace Islam, he assured his protection for the Prophet and encouraged Ali to remain by his side. The first confrontation. One day, a group of Muslims, including Ammar ibn Yasir, Abdullah ibn Mas'udi, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Khabab ibn al-Arat, and Sa'id ibn Zaid, were praying in a valley outside Mecca. A group of polytheists came upon them and began mocking them. The young Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, angered by their insults, struck one of the polytheists, Abdullah ibn Qattal, with a camel's jawbone, resulting in his death. This was the first recorded act of defense in Islam. The legacy of the first believers. Those who accepted Islam during these challenging early years are known as the Sabiqun al-Awwalun, the earliest converts. Historical accounts estimate their number to be around 130 men and women. Although it remains uncertain whether all of them embraced Islam before the public declaration of the message, they played a pivotal role in laying the foundation for the future growth of Islam.